What you're about to hear is the story of a master plumber, 30 years in the trade, who got stiffed by the kind of homeowners who think a Pottery Barn catalog makes them tile experts. They refused to pay his son $4,800 for a bathroom remodel, called the work sloppy, demanded a redo or no check. So the old man went back to fix it himself, except the fix involved sugar, honey, and a whole lot of patience. 3 weeks later, the homeowners had a bug problem that would make an exterminator cry. This one's a slow burn, and the ending is absolutely beautiful. My dad mixed sugar into the grout. After entitled homeowners refused to pay me $4,800 for their bathroom tile, they spent $14,000 trying to fix what came next. I need to tell you guys about my dad, because what he did last month is either the most brilliant or the most insane thing I've ever witnessed a grown man do with a bag of sugar and a bucket of grout. I'm still not sure which. Maybe both. Some background. My name's Bryce. I'm 31 and I run a small plumbing and tile outfit out of Central Ohio. Been at it for about 8 years now. Started as a helper on my dad's crew when I was 19, got my own license at 23 and went solo at 25. I do kitchens, bathrooms, full remodels, whatever people need. It's honest work and it pays the bills. I'm not getting rich, but I'm doing fine. Got a little house on about half an acre outside of town, a truck that runs most of the time, and enough in savings that I don't panic when the furnace acts up. My Yelp reviews are solid, 4.8 stars, over 60 reviews, and I've never once had a job go to dispute, until the Carlyles. My dad, though, my dad is the real deal. 30 years as a master plumber and tile specialist. He taught me everything. The man can look at a bathroom floor and tell you within a quarter inch where the subfloor dips. He's got hands like sandpaper and an eye for detail that borders on obsessive. When I was a kid, he'd rip out his own work if one tile was a 1/16 of an inch off. I used to think he was crazy. Now I get it. He's semi-retired now. Helps me on bigger jobs sometimes, when I need an extra set of hands. But mostly he's at home messing with his vegetable garden and watching old westerns. He built a raised bed system in the backyard last spring. Cedar planks, drip irrigation, the whole setup. That's just how he is. If he touches something, it's done right, or it doesn't get done. Quiet guy. Doesn't say much. When he does talk, it's worth listening to. My mom passed about 4 years ago, and he's been on his own since, which I think made him even quieter. But not sadder, just more settled. Like a man who's already figured out what matters and doesn't waste words on the rest. Anyway, about 2 months ago, I got a call from a couple I'll call the Carlyles, Richard and Diane Carlyle. They wanted a full master bathroom renovation. Tear out the old tile floor and shower surround, install new porcelain tile throughout, new grout, new trim, the whole deal. They'd found me through a referral from a neighbor I'd done work for the year before. I went out to their place to give an estimate. Big house in one of those newer subdivisions where every home looks the same, and the HOA probably has opinions about your mailbox font. The Carlyles walked me through the bathroom, showed me what they wanted. Diane had a binder, like a literal 3-ring binder with photos torn from magazines, paint swatches, and tile samples organized by color family. I quoted them $4,800 for the full job, materials and labor. That's a fair price for the scope of work. Honestly, it was a little under what most guys would charge, but the neighbor referral meant something to me, and I figured a clean job here could lead to more work in the neighborhood. That subdivision had probably 200 homes in it, most of them built around the same time, which means the bathrooms were all hitting that age where stuff needs replacing. One good job could turn into 10. Richard nodded at the number without blinking. Diane wrote it down in her binder. Yes, in the actual binder. And then asked if I could break it down by materials versus labor. I did because I'm not trying to hide anything. She studied the numbers for a minute, then looked at Richard, and they both agreed. We shook on it. I wrote up a contract. Scope of work, payment terms, timeline, everything spelled out. They signed it, and I scheduled the work to start the following Monday. The job took about 5 days. Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 each day, except Wednesday when I had to leave early because my truck needed an oil change. I tore out all the old tile. The demo alone took a full day because the previous installer had used way too much thinset. Prepped the subfloor, which was in decent shape, thank goodness. Laid the new porcelain in a staggered pattern Diane had picked out from her binder. Grouted everything with a medium gray that she'd specifically chosen. She'd ordered 6 sample colors before deciding, by the way. Sealed it. Installed new trim around the base and the shower threshold. I even caulked the transition points with color-matched silicone, which isn't always included at that price point, but I like the finished look. Clean, solid work. Now here's where things started getting weird. During the job, Diane was hovering. And I don't mean she checked in once or twice, I mean she was in the bathroom every 45 minutes with her phone, taking pictures of the progress and comparing them to her binder photos. She'd point at a tile and say something like, "This one seems darker than the sample," or, "Is this edge supposed to be that close to the wall?" I explained, patiently, because that's what you do. That tile has natural color variation, especially porcelain with a stone look finish. I told her the spacing was within industry standards. I showed her the level. I showed her the spacers. She'd nod like she understood, and then come back an hour later with the same kind of question, but slightly rephrased. Richard was different. He barely spoke during the job, but when he did, it was always some version of, "Well, Diane has very high standards." The way he said it, almost like he was warning me. Not in a helpful way, more like he was setting the stage for something. Side note, I've been doing this long enough to recognize when someone is building a case to dispute the final bill, the constant photos, the vague complaints during the job that never get specific enough for me to address, the spouse who keeps mentioning standards. It's a pattern, but I was hoping I was wrong. I finished on Friday, cleaned everything up, did a final walkthrough with both of them. Diane brought her binder. She went over every tile, every grout line, every corner. She took more photos. Then she said, and I'll never forget this, "I'll need some time to evaluate the work before we release payment." I said that's fine. Take the weekend. But per the contract, payment was due within 5 business days of completion. Monday came. Nothing. Tuesday. Nothing. I texted Richard on Wednesday. He said Diane was still evaluating. I asked if there was a specific concern. He said, "She's noticed some irregularities." I called Diane directly on Thursday. She answered on the first ring, which told me she'd been waiting for the call. She didn't even say hello, just launched straight into a list like she'd been rehearsing. The grout lines weren't perfectly uniform. One tile near the toilet base had a slight lip. The color variation between tiles was unacceptable. The shower threshold wasn't level. She'd actually put a marble on it to test the grade, like she was running some kind of home science experiment. She also said the caulking near the shower door looked cloudy, which, silicone caulk is translucent. That's what it looks like. That's what all silicone caulk looks like. I told her I'd come back and look at everything she was concerned about. I went over that Saturday, brought my level, my measuring tools, the whole kit. I checked every single thing she'd listed. The grout lines were within a 1/16 of an inch of each other, well within standard tolerances. The tile near the toilet had a hairline lip of maybe 2 millimeters, which is normal on a subfloor transition and completely safe. The color variation was inherent to the tile she picked. I literally showed her the manufacturer's spec sheet that says, "Natural variation in color is expected and desirable." And the shower threshold? Dead level. I put my 4-foot level on it in front of both of them. Perfect bubble. Diane looked at it and said, "Well, it doesn't look level." That's when I knew. This wasn't about quality. This was about money. I told them the work meets every standard I'd agreed to in the contract, and I needed payment by end of week. Diane said she'd think about it. Richard walked me to the door, and I swear this man looked me in the eye and said, "You know, some contractors would just eat this and move on to keep the peace." I didn't say anything, just got in my truck and drove home. I remember sitting in the driveway for a good 10 minutes before going inside. Not because I was upset. I was, but more than that, I was just tired. You put your body through a week of labor. You leave a job site cleaner than you found it. You document everything, you explain everything, you show people the tools and the measurements, and then someone looks you in the face and tells you to just take the loss. I don't know. It hits different when you're a small operation. I don't have a corporate office absorbing the loss. That $4,800 is groceries and truck payments and keeping the lights on. End of the following week, still no payment. I sent a formal demand letter, certified mail, the whole thing. Nothing. I called twice. Once Diane picked up and told me she'd had a professional friend evaluate the work, and that this friend agreed it was substandard. She couldn't tell me who this friend was, or what their qualifications were, or what specifically was substandard that I hadn't already disproven. So now I'm out $4,800, plus my time, plus materials, And these people are living in a beautiful bathroom that I built with my own hands, and they're treating me like I'm some kind of scam artist. I told my dad about it over dinner one night. We eat together most Sundays. I bring food over, we sit at the kitchen table he's had since I was a kid, and we talk about whatever. This particular Sunday, I'd brought sandwiches from this deli he likes, and I just started unloading. The whole story. Diane's binder, Richard's high standards routine, the marble on the threshold, the phantom professional friend. Just venting, honestly. I wasn't even asking for advice. I was just frustrated. I'd already started looking into small claims court, but I knew that was going to be months of nonsense for a judgment they'd probably fight anyway. My dad just listened, didn't say a word the whole time I was talking. When I finished, he took a long sip of his coffee, set the mug down, and said, "Give me their number." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I'm going to call them and offer to fix the work, for free. Father-son accountability. They'll love it." I started to argue, but he gave me that look, the one where you know you're not winning this discussion. So I gave him the number. Hold on. Pause. For those listening, this is me, not the OP. I need you to understand what just happened. A 30-year master tradesman just asked for the phone number of two people who stiffed his son. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rant. He sipped his coffee like a man who'd already played out every move in his head. This is the quiet guy at the poker table who hasn't blipped in 4 hands and is about to flip a full house. The Carlyles think they just dodged a $4,800 bill. They have no idea they just rolled out the welcome mat for the final boss. Buckle up. My dad called the Carlyles the next morning. I wasn't there for the call, but he told me afterward how it went. He introduced himself, said he was Bryce's father, and that he'd been in the tile business for 30 years. He said he was embarrassed by the work his son had done and wanted to come fix it personally, at no charge, as a matter of professional pride. Diane, and this is the part that gets me, Diane apparently started gushing. Oh, how wonderful. How refreshing to deal with someone who takes craftsmanship seriously. She said she could tell his dad was from a different generation of tradesmen. She even told him she wished Bryce had his father's attention to detail. My dad told me that part with no expression on his face whatsoever. He just relayed it like he was reading a weather report, but I could tell it landed. That was probably the moment it went from a lesson to a mission. He said thank you, ma'am, and scheduled a visit for that Saturday. Now, I need to explain something. My work was flawless. I'm not saying that out of ego. I'm saying it because my dad inspected the bathroom himself the night before his Saturday visit. He got down on his hands and knees with a flashlight, checked every grout line, every tile edge, every seam. When he stood up, he looked at me and said, "Your work is clean. Better than clean." That was high praise from him. Then he went to the garage. I didn't know what he was doing at first. I heard him rummaging around, opening cabinets. He came back inside carrying a small plastic container. Inside was regular granulated sugar, maybe half a cup, and a squeeze bottle of honey, like the bear-shaped kind you get at the grocery store. I asked him what that was for. He said, "Insurance." Anyway, that Saturday, my dad showed up at the Carlyles' house with his tool bag, his bucket of fresh grout, and his insurance. He told me later that Diane answered the door looking like she'd won some kind of contest. She walked him through the bathroom, pointing out every imaginary flaw she'd cataloged. My dad nodded along, said things like, "I see what you mean," and "My son should have caught that," playing the part. Then he told them he'd need about 4 hours alone to redo the grout work properly. He said he works best without anyone watching. Old school habit, he called it. Diane said of course, they'd be out running errands anyway. They left. He watched from the window until their car turned the corner. Then he locked the front door, and my dad went to work. But he wasn't fixing anything. He told me later that he sat down on the bathroom floor for a full 5 minutes first, just looking at everything, planning, figuring out which areas would have the most moisture exposure, which spots were least visible, where the warm air from the shower would circulate most. Thinking like the bugs would think, he said. Then he started. He pulled out the grout from a few strategic areas, behind the toilet base, along the shower floor seams, and in the corners where the wall tile meets the floor, places you wouldn't easily see. Then he mixed up his new batch of grout. Except before he packed it in, he stirred in the sugar. Not a ton, just enough to mix through evenly. And in the deeper seams along the shower floor, he squeezed in thin lines of honey before packing the grout over them. Then he grouted everything back in, smooth and perfect. cleaned up his tools, wiped down the surfaces, left the bathroom looking exactly like it had before. Maybe even a little better, because my dad's finishing work is immaculate. When the Carlyles came home about 3 hours later, my dad was sitting on the front porch drinking a water bottle and reading a fishing magazine he'd found on their coffee table. Diane went straight to the bathroom. She was in there for maybe 15 minutes, checked every grout line, ran her fingers along the seams, probably took 40 photos. When she came out, she, for the first time, said she was satisfied. She actually used the word pristine. Richard shook my dad's hand and said something like, "This is what we expected from the beginning." My dad just smiled and said thank you. He put his tools in the truck, returned the fishing magazine to the coffee table, and drove home. He didn't tell me what he'd done right away. That night at dinner, he just said, "It's handled." I assumed he meant he'd smooth things over. I dropped it. Wait. Let me get in here for a second. It's handled. 2 words. This man just booby-trapped a bathroom with sugar and honey like some kind of Home Alone villain, drove home, and delivered his debrief like a retired CIA operative ordering a sandwich. Meanwhile, Princess Binder is in there running her fingers over the new grout lines, thinking she finally broke a tradesman into submission. She didn't break anyone. She activated a guy who's been solving problems since before she was organizing paint swatches into color families. And the best part? The clock just started ticking. Nature's about to send the invoice. About 10 days later, my dad sat me down and told me everything. The sugar, the honey, where he put it. Why? See, sugar in grout does 2 things. First, it weakens the grout over time. The sugar interferes with the cement curing process, so within a few weeks the grout in those spots would start crumbling and cracking. But more importantly, and this is the part my dad was counting on, sugar and honey attract insects, specifically ants. And once ants find a food source inside a wall or floor, they tell their friends. And their friends tell their friends. And within a couple weeks, you've got a superhighway of ants running through your bathroom infrastructure. My dad knew this because 20-something years ago, he'd done a repair job at a house that had a previous handyman who'd accidentally spilled soda in a wall cavity before closing it up. By the time my dad got there, the ant infestation was so bad they'd had to gut the entire wall. He never forgot it. When he told me, I just sat there. I didn't know whether to laugh or have a panic attack. My dad's not a vindictive person. He's the quietest, most even-tempered guy I know. But he has this line, and if you cross it, especially if you mess with his family, he's a different person. Not loud different, quiet different, which is worse. I asked him if he was worried about getting caught. He said, "Caught doing what?" I fixed the grout. I used a standard Portland cement mix. If bugs show up, that's a pest control issue, not a plumbing issue. Then he went back to watching Gunsmoke. Okay, stop. I want everyone to take a moment and appreciate what's happening. This man weaponized breakfast condiments. He turned a bear-shaped honey bottle into a biological delivery system. This is some Sun Tzu meets Martha Stewart energy. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, except the enemy is a woman with a 3-ring binder, and the weapon is Domino brand sugar. If revenge was a cooking show, this man just won the season finale without turning on the oven. Anyway, the Carlyles are about to have some uninvited guests, and I need you to hear how it plays out. 3 weeks after my dad's visit, I got a text from the neighbor who'd originally referred me to the Carlyles. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, "Hey, did you hear what's going on at the Carlyle house? They've got some kind of massive bug problem. Diane is losing her mind." I played dumb, said no, hadn't heard anything. What kind of bugs? Ants, tons of them, coming up through the bathroom floor and along the base of the shower. The neighbor said Diane had posted in the neighborhood Facebook group asking for emergency pest control recommendations, and that the post had like 40 comments. I will admit I looked up that Facebook post, sat on my couch with a bowl of cereal, and read the whole thing twice. Diane had written this long, dramatic description, like 4 paragraphs, of how they'd woken up one morning to find hundreds of ants swarming their master bathroom. She said they were coming from the grout lines and from behind the toilet. She said she'd tried every spray and trap from the hardware store, and nothing was working. She said, and this is the part that nearly killed me, "We just had this bathroom completely redone, and now it's like this. Unbelievable." Yeah, unbelievable. Over the next 2 weeks, it got worse, way worse. The ants were just the opening act. A second neighbor, a guy named Phil who lives 2 doors down from the Carlyles, told me that Diane had knocked on his door at 7 in the morning, asking if he'd ever had a pest problem. Phil said she looked like she hadn't slept. He also told me the Carlyles had called a pest control company, who found evidence of cockroaches in the bathroom walls. Apparently, the moisture from the shower, combined with the sugar traces, created a perfect little ecosystem in there. Warm, humid, and loaded with simple carbohydrates. Basically, an all-you-can-eat buffet for anything with 6 legs. The pest control guy told them the infestation had likely been building for weeks and had spread from the bathroom into the adjacent bedroom wall. He apparently found ant trails running behind the baseboard all the way into their walk-in closet. Diane's closet, with all her shoes and clothes. I probably shouldn't have laughed when Phil told me that part, but I did. Diane called me. She actually called me, asking if something I'd done during the original tile job could have caused a bug problem. I told her, calmly, professionally, that tile and grout work doesn't cause pest issues. I suggested she contact a licensed exterminator, which she clearly already had. She then asked if my dad might have accidentally introduced something. I said my dad's been doing this for 3 decades and has never had a pest complaint. She didn't have a response for that. Long pause. Then she said, "Okay," in a real quiet voice and hung up. I put my phone down on the counter and just stood there for a second. Then I made myself a sandwich. I don't know why I remember the sandwich. Turkey and mustard. Totally irrelevant, but that's what was happening. Hold on, let me jump in. She called him. She called the man she refused to pay, the guy she told to eat the loss, and asked him for help. That is like slashing someone's tires and then asking them for a ride to work. The audacity is genuinely Olympic level. If entitlement was a sport, the Carlyles would be on a Wheaties box. And the fact that Bryce kept his composure? That's the real power move. He didn't gloat. He didn't flinch. He gave her the most boring, professional, unhelpful, but technically helpful answer possible, and let her marinate in it. Over the following weeks, I got the full picture from the neighbor network. Apparently, the Carlyles went through 3 different pest control companies. The first one did a standard treatment. Sprays, bait traps, the basics. Didn't work. The ants kept coming. The second company did a more aggressive treatment and found that the infestation had reached their bedroom closet somehow. They treated the whole upstairs. Still didn't fully work. The ants would disappear for a day or 2 and then come right back. Because the source was in the grout, and nobody was looking at the grout. Why would they? Grout is grout. Nobody thinks to test grout for sugar content. That's not a thing. Until it is. The third company was the one that finally figured it out, sort of. They told the Carlyles that there was an organic attractant somewhere in the bathroom structure, and that the only way to fully eliminate the problem was to tear out the affected tile and grout, treat the subfloor, and reinstall. So the Carlyles had to hire another tile crew to rip out the very bathroom that I had built and my dad had fixed. The irony of that is something I think about a lot. They refused to pay $4,800 for the first install. Now they were paying someone else even more to undo it and start over. And this time, they couldn't exactly stiff the bill because they were desperate. You don't get to pull the "I need to evaluate the work" card when there are roaches in your closet. From what I heard through the grapevine, the total damage went something like this. Roughly $3,200 across the 3 pest control companies. About $6,500 for the new tile tear out and reinstall, because they had to go with whoever could do it fastest, and emergency work costs more. Plus, another $800 or so in hotel stays, because Diane refused to sleep in the house while the roach situation was being dealt with. And some amount, I never got a firm number, for the exterminator to treat the bedroom wall that had gotten hit too. Someone said the whole thing ran over $14,000. For context, they could have paid me $4,800 and had a beautiful, perfectly installed bathroom. Instead, they got ants, roaches, hotel bills, and a bathroom that had to be gutted and redone by strangers. My dad, when I told him the numbers, didn't react. He just nodded slowly and said, "Expensive lesson." Then he asked me if I wanted more coffee. Final update. It's been about 6 weeks since the Carlyles' bathroom was redone by the new crew. The pest situation is apparently under control now. I haven't heard from either of them directly and don't expect to. The neighbor who originally referred me felt terrible about the whole thing. She'd had no idea the Carlyles were going to try to skip out on payment. She's since recommended me to 2 more families in the neighborhood, both of which became paying clients. Paid on time, no drama. So that worked out. I did eventually file in small claims for the original $4,800. Filled out the paperwork, paid the filing fee, showed up to court on a Tuesday morning with my contract, my photos, my text message screenshots, and the certified mail receipt from the demand letter. The Carlyles didn't even show up to the hearing. I think they were too wrapped up in their bug situation at the time. The judge asked if I had documentation. I handed him the folder. He looked through it for about 90 seconds, asked if there had been any communication from the defendants. I said no, and he entered a default judgment. The whole thing took maybe 12 minutes. I collected about 3 weeks later when they realized ignoring a court judgment is worse than just paying the bill. I think their bank account got flagged or something because the payment came in real quick after that. So in the end, I got my money anyway, and they paid roughly $14,000 on top of it to deal with the aftermath of their own entitlement. Plus, they lost the referral pipeline from the neighbor, who now actively warns people about them. My dad has never brought it up again, not once. He went right back to his garden and his westerns like nothing happened. Last time I was over there, he was building a little trellis for his tomato plants out of some scrap wood. Just a regular Sunday. I asked him one time if he felt bad about it, and he gave me this look. Not angry, not smug, just sort of tired, and said, "They tried to steal from my son." That was it. End of discussion. He picked up his coffee and turned back to the TV. I think Longmire was on, or maybe it was Yellowstone. Wait, no. Gunsmoke. It's always Gunsmoke. I still think about that sometimes. About how a quiet, patient man with a bag of sugar and a honey bear did more damage than any lawsuit could have. He didn't yell at the Carlyles, didn't threaten them, didn't even raise his voice. He just let nature take its course, literally. The one thing I can't quite figure out, and this is a loose thread I'll probably never tie up, is whether the third pest control company ever said anything to the Carlyles about the sugar specifically. The neighbor said they mentioned an organic attractant, but didn't get more specific than that. I don't know if they tested the grout or just treated the symptoms. Part of me thinks they know something was off but can't prove anything. Part of me thinks they'll never figure it out. Either way, I'm not losing sleep over it. I've been getting more work since all of this. Not because of the Carlyle situation. Nobody outside of that neighborhood knows the full story. But just because I keep doing good work and people keep talking. I'm booked out about 5 weeks right now, which is the busiest I've ever been. And my dad still comes out to help on the big jobs when I ask. He showed up last week to help me with a kitchen floor in Westerville. Didn't charge me a dime, just wanted something to do. We worked side by side all morning without talking much. That's kind of our thing. Oh, and one more thing. About a month after everything settled down, Diane left a 1-star review of my business online. Said the work was shoddy and created ongoing problems. I responded publicly with photos of the finished work, the manufacturer specs for the tile she chose, the level readings I'd documented, and a copy of the signed contract with payment terms she'd violated. Her review got 12 responses from other clients of mine defending the work. She deleted it within a week. My dad saw the review before she took it down. He just shook his head and said, "Some people don't know when to quit." Then he went outside to water his tomatoes. Anyway, that's the story. I'm not saying what my dad did was right. I'm definitely not saying it's something I'd recommend. But I am saying that there's a certain kind of justice in it. The kind that doesn't come from a courtroom. The kind that comes from a man who spent 30 years perfecting his craft, being told that his family's work isn't good enough by someone who thinks owning a binder makes them an expert. So, would you have done what my dad did? Or would you have just gone the legal route and let it play out? Honestly curious. Listen, I'm not here to tell you to put sugar in anybody's grout. That's between you and your conscience. But I will say this. The Carlyles had every chance to just pay the man. $4,800 for a clean, professional bathroom remodel. Instead, they played games with a family that builds things for a living. And it turns out the guy who's been mixing grout since Reagan was in office knows exactly what happens when you add the wrong ingredients. $14,000 in pest control and retiling later, I bet that binder doesn't feel so useful anymore. Drop a comment. What would you have done in Bryce's shoes? And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. We've got more stories like this coming. See you in the next one.